What if a terrorist killed your family member, and the next day newspapers wrote about how kind he was, how hardworking, how poor his childhood was, or how religious and well-mannered he was? What if the media spent more time explaining the killer's struggles than naming your loved one who died? What if they called the evidence against him unconfirmed, even when police had DNA proof? What if they made you feel like maybe, just maybe, the terrorist was the real victim here? Sound insane? Sound impossible? Well, it just happened in India after 15 people were blown to pieces near India's Red Fort. This isn't a hypothetical question. This is exactly what a media outlet did. And it's time someone called out this sick game. The blast, November 10th, 2025. Red Fort area, Delhi. Around midday, a car explodes. Not a small blast. A massive explosion that shook the entire area. The kind that leaves nothing recognizable. Just twisted metal, smoke, blood, and chaos. Within minutes, the death toll starts rising. 5 dead, then 8, then 10, then 13, eventually the final count. 15 innocent people killed, more than 20 injured, some critically. Burns covering their bodies. Lives destroyed in seconds. According to Delhi police, there were 2 to 3 people inside the car when it exploded. Preliminary findings pointed to one terrifying possibility: a suicide attack. Someone deliberately drove that car packed with explosives into a crowded area and detonated it. The question wasn't if this was terrorism. The question was who did it and why. For 2 days, investigations continued. Forensic teams collected samples. Intelligence agencies worked around the clock. DNA tests were conducted. Evidence was gathered. On November 12th, the Indian government made it official. This was a terrorist act, a deliberate attack on Indian citizens, an attack on India's sovereignty, right in front of one of the nation's most iconic monuments, the Red Fort. But by then, something else had already happened, something that made many Indians angrier than the blast itself. The media had already decided who the real victim was, and it wasn't the 15 dead people. The propaganda begins just hours after the Red Fort blast, while families were still identifying bodies, while hospitals were treating burn victims, while the nation was in shock. The Wire published an article. On the surface, it looked like a human interest piece, emotional, detailed, about 2 Kashmiri doctors linked to a terror investigation. One of them, Dr. Umar Nabi, was suspected of being the driver of the car that exploded. The article had everything: grieving families, struggling students, poor backgrounds, academic achievements, emotional quotes from relatives. But here's where it gets disturbing. By the time that article went live, Delhi police had already confirmed something crucial through DNA analysis. Dr. Umar Nabi was the driver of that car. Forensic teams had matched DNA samples from the blast site with his mother's DNA. Multiple news outlets, India Today, ANI, and others, had reported this information 10 hours earlier. The facts were public. The evidence was solid. Police had confirmed it officially, yet the Wire still called these facts unconfirmed. Not once, not twice, 5 times in the same article. Unconfirmed reports. Officials have not confirmed. While officials have not linked the Delhi blast to the arrests, even after the family had identified his photograph, even after DNA evidence was public record, they still planted doubt. Why? Because their narrative needed that doubt to exist. The humanization game. But the doubt was just the beginning. What came next was pure emotional manipulation. The article painted Dr. Umar Nabi as a hero, a shining example of perseverance, a poor boy who overcame everything. They described his dilapidated double-story house, his tattered clothes, his cheap chappals, how he studied by candlelight, how he never attended expensive private tuitions, how he was so brilliant he could diagnose patients just by looking at them. A role model for all of us, the article quoted someone saying. They wrote paragraphs about his father quitting his government job, about his mother literally begging relatives for money to continue his education, about how the whole village didn't sleep the day his medical exam results came, about how it felt like a dream come true. The language was designed to make you feel something: sympathy, sadness, admiration even. But here's what The Wire conveniently left out. India Today's investigation revealed a very different picture. Dr. Umar Nabi had been fired from his job for medical negligence. A patient had died under his care. He repeatedly abandoned his duties. Multiple complaints were filed against him. So which version is true? The brilliant doctor who could diagnose patients by looking at them? Or the negligent doctor who let patients die and got fired? The Wire chose which truth to tell, and they chose the one that made a terrorist look like a victim. This is called the illusory truth effect. It's a psychological principle. The more your brain hears something, the truer it feels, even when evidence says otherwise. Repeat a lie enough times, and people start believing it. This isn't journalism. This is propaganda science being used on innocent citizens. The article spent more words describing the terrorist's torn clothes than naming the 15 people he killed. More space on his poor childhood than on the families destroyed by his bomb. Citizens reading this online erupted in fury. Social media exploded with rage. One comment said, "The Wire is a jihadist channel. This is white-collar terrorism. Why doesn't the government have the balls to ban them?" People weren't just angry. They were disgusted. Because this wasn't the first time. This pattern repeats itself over and over. Every time there's a terror attack, certain media outlets rush to humanize the terrorist, to create sympathy, to shift focus from the crime to the circumstances, to make the killer look like he had no choice. The bomber becomes the victim. The system becomes the villain. And the actual victims? They barely get mentioned. But Dr. Umar Nabi wasn't alone. There was another doctor in this story, Dr. Muzammil Shakil Ghani, also from the same village in Kashmir, Koil, Pulwama district. Muzammil's story was different from Umar's. He didn't come from crushing poverty. His father, Shakil Ahmad Ghani, was a prosperous apple farmer, rich enough to afford a payment seat, meaning paying several lakhs of rupees to get his son admitted to a private medical college in Jammu. After finishing his MBBS degree, Muzammil worked briefly at the prestigious Sher-e Kashmir Institute of Medical Sciences in Srinagar. Then he moved to Al-Falah University in Faridabad, the same university where Umar worked, to pursue his postgraduate specialization. The Wire quoted his sister describing him as kind and religious, grounded despite professional success. He treated poor patients in Faridabad and would share their stories with family, telling them to be grateful to God. Sounds perfect, right? A model citizen, a caring doctor. Except he was arrested by security forces for being part of a terror module, for helping run a terror network aided by Pakistani handlers. He was always focused on studies. What the media has been reporting is all lies, she told The Wire. And The Wire published her denial without any critical questioning, without mentioning the evidence against him, without talking to investigators, without giving equal space to the victim's side. Just the terrorist's family saying he's innocent, and The Wire treating that as fact. Two doctors, one from extreme poverty, one from comfortable wealth, one who struggled, one who had it easier, both educated, both employed, both respected in their communities, yet both allegedly involved in the same terror operation that killed 15 people. This destroys the old explanation for terrorism. This wasn't about poverty, not about lack of education, not about having no opportunities in life. This was about something else entirely, something far more dangerous. Understanding the new threat intelligence agencies and security experts have a name for this phenomenon: white-collar terrorism. It's when educated professionals, doctors, engineers, professors, IT workers, use their positions, their education, their social standing to support and execute terrorist activities. They're the brain behind the operations, the management, the logistics team, the planners. Think of terrorism like a business. You need field workers who carry out attacks, but you also need managers, people who arrange funding, handle communications, secure weapons and explosives, recruit new members, plan operations, use their professional expertise to make everything run smoothly. White-collar terrorists are those managers. A doctor has automatic credibility in society. When he speaks, people listen. When he travels frequently, nobody questions it. Doctors attend conferences. When he handles large sums of money, it seems normal. Doctors earn well. His profession becomes his perfect disguise. An engineer understands technology. He knows how to use encryption so police can't track messages. He knows how to spread propaganda online without getting caught. He can teach others how to build bombs using just internet tutorials. A professor influences young minds every single day. He can slowly radicalize students using intellectual arguments that sound reasonable, plant ideas that grow into extremism over time. These people use the education that India gave them, often funded by taxpayer money, to destroy the country that educated them. They leverage the respect society gives their profession to build terror networks. They exploit the trust people place in them. And they do all this while appearing completely normal. That's what makes them so dangerous. Until one day, police show up with arrest warrants, and everyone is shocked. But by then, the damage is already done. Traditional counterterrorism was straightforward: track militants, find camps, monitor weapons. But how do you catch threats that look like respectable citizens? A doctor's irregular hours are normal. An engineer's international travel is for work. A professor's private student meetings are expected. Every suspicious behavior has legitimate explanation. They pay taxes, attend school functions, participate in community life. Professional records are spotless. Neighbors vouch for them. These educated terrorists understand surveillance, use military-grade encryption, compartmentalize information, maintain separate digital identities. Detection is incredibly difficult. Human intelligence fails because they don't fit typical profiles. Technical surveillance hits encrypted walls. Financial transactions look completely legitimate. India's primary anti-terrorism law, UAPA, was designed for traditional terrorists, not white-collar ones. No specific provisions, no clear definitions. The law treats all terrorists identically, whether they're armed militants or masterminds in offices. This creates massive prosecution challenges. Defense lawyers exploit gaps. Courts struggle with digital evidence. Convictions are extremely difficult, even when guilt is certain. Cases drag on for years while terror networks continue operating. And this brings us full circle. Back to the Wire's article. Back to the question of whose side they're really on. That article wasn't just bad journalism, it actively harmed India's national security. Here's exactly how. When media outlets publish sympathetic profiles of terrorists, they achieve multiple objectives for terror organizations, whether they intend to or not. First, they create martyrs. They transform killers into tragic heroes, folk legends. They give terrorists exactly the kind of publicity and validation they desperately want. The bomber's face gets seen by millions. His story gets told. He becomes famous. Second, they brutally demoralize security forces and victims' families. Imagine you're a father whose daughter died in that Red Fort blast. Her body was so badly burned, you identified her by her jewelry. You're still in shock, still grieving. And then you read a major media outlet's article describing how kind and religious the bomber was, how hard his childhood was, how brilliant he was at his studies, how he's actually the victim here. How does that make you feel? Third, they provide ready-made propaganda material. These articles get immediately shared in radicalization networks. Terror handlers use them as proof that even mainstream Indian media agrees with their cause. See? Even they understand our grievances. Even they think the system is the real problem. Fourth, they normalize terrorism in public consciousness. They present it as an understandable response to difficult circumstances instead of an unforgivable crime against humanity. He wasn't evil, he was just desperate. He wasn't a terrorist, he was a victim who fought back. This isn't theoretical speculation. Intelligence agencies have documented exactly how terror handlers use such media coverage in recruitment drives. They show potential recruits these articles. They say, look, even liberal Indians secretly support us. Even their media understands our pain. The establishment is oppressing both them and us. Join us. When questioned, some journalists hide behind press freedom. They claim they're just providing context, showing human complexity, practicing balanced reporting, giving voice to all sides. But there's a massive difference between providing context and creating sympathy, between showing complexity and justifying violence, between balanced reporting and propaganda. When 15 people are dead, when families are destroyed, when children are orphaned, when a nation is mourning. That is not the time to write a 2,000-word essay about the terrorist's torn clothes, about his poor childhood, about his academic struggles, about how brilliant and religious he was. That's not journalism. That's a deliberate editorial choice, a choice to prioritize the terrorist's narrative over the victim's pain, a choice to create sympathy where absolutely none should exist, a choice to humanize someone who deliberately chose to kill innocents. And when a media outlet makes such choices repeatedly, not once but again and again with every terror incident, a pattern becomes undeniable. So what's the answer? How does a country fight this? Government must prioritize early detection and de-radicalization before violence occurs, requiring careful community participation. Sensitive positions need thorough background checks, including social media monitoring. Intelligence agencies must coordinate better through integrated databases and joint task forces. Legal frameworks need updating to cover propaganda and cyber operations. Counter-narratives must match terrorist sophistication using modern media tactics. Technology like AI should identify radicalization patterns ethically. International pressure on terror havens is essential. Most critically, address real grievances through inclusive development while never appeasing extremists, ensuring moderate voices prevail over radical narratives. White-collar terrorism is real, growing, sophisticated, and far more dangerous than traditional terrorism because it's invisible until too late. Media outlets like The Wire that humanize terrorists are complicit, providing ideological support, sustaining terror networks, creating narratives radicalizing vulnerable youth, undermining national resolve, all while hiding behind constitutional protections meant for honest journalism. But India has survived worse. Partition violence killing millions, decades of cross-border terrorism, multiple insurgencies, direct attacks on parliament, hotels, trains, markets. This nation endured through resilience, democratic institutions, and unity when it mattered most. White-collar terrorism is serious but not invincible. The choice facing every Indian is equally clear. Will you stay vigilant against radicalization? Speak up when something's wrong? Question media narratives instead of blindly believing them? Stand united despite differences? National security doesn't rest only with soldiers or police. It rests with every citizen refusing to let extremism take root. Every person choosing truth over comfortable lies. Every professional honoring their oath to serve humanity and nation. Don't just read headlines, interrogate them. Question them. Dig deeper. Propaganda doesn't need you believing obvious lies, only doubting truth once, hesitating, thinking, maybe both sides have a point. Once that doubt enters, the battle is half lost. The war against white-collar terrorism has just begun. The question isn't whether India will win. They will. They always have. The only question is how many innocent lives will be lost before victory comes. That answer depends on choices you make today. The choice has always belonged to the people, and the people must choose now.